Hi everyone, welcome back to Shiny Brite Doggo. We are Laura and Janine, two vintage holiday enthusiasts, and if you're new to our channel, that is sort of who we are and what we do. We collect vintage holiday. It's our #1 passion, and that's sort of what we document on the channel, us going out to estate sales, even garbage picking, looking for vintage holiday scores, maybe vintage decor, mid-century things, anything that's sort of cool and catches our eye.
And in today's video, we are going to be talking about vintage Halloween decorations, one of our favorite holidays and one of our favorite things to collect.
Yep.
We are going to show you how to identify vintage Halloween and give you some tips on where to find those items.
Yeah, we're gonna basically tell you everything that we've learned over the past 7 years collecting this stuff out in the wild and sort of give an overview of almost everything you need to know. We're mainly going to be focusing on the earlier decades of Halloween, give you a little history. It's not gonna cover every single piece. And if we missed some things that you were hoping to hear about, let us know in the comments. But this is gonna basically be a comprehensive guide of vintage Halloween decor. To start off, let's talk about die cuts. Die cuts are synonymous with vintage Halloween or just Halloween decorations. They are basically paper cutout decorations.
For me, die cuts are so nostalgic. I remember seeing them all over the walls at school, during Halloween parties, in the windows at my friends' homes, and I didn't know how old they were.
Yeah, die cuts go back many, many decades. And actually the word die cut and why they are called die cuts is because they are literally cut out using a piece of metal called a die, so sort of stamped out of cardboard. Actually, the first that were produced were from Germany in the early 1900s. And these were super detailed, embossed, and by embossed, it's sort of like when the cardboard has some sort of like texture to it and almost looks three-dimensional. And the ones that were made in Germany were so detailed and so textured, they almost look like 3D.
Since they were made of paper, over the years, a lot have been destroyed. They can easily fall apart, disintegrate, and be eaten by vermin. And that makes them highly collectible because they are very hard to find.
Yeah, they are so expensive. If you take a quick look on eBay, and some of the ways you can search this on eBay is antique embossed German die cuts. Those are some of the keywords we use. They can go for lots and lots of monies. And because they're so rare, like you said, Janine, we really only come across them on eBay and maybe at an antique mall. So something that we don't actually have any, I think, in our collection, but we're always on the lookout because they are just such a great piece of vintage Halloween and just like they really encapsulate, I think, the history of Halloween.
Absolutely.
And some of the motifs and images used are just so amazing. So we talked about some of those really rare pieces, but we see die cuts that are much more common. And that's because in the mid-century, maybe like the 50s and 60s, all the way through to the 90s, companies started mass producing die cuts. These have become a little bit more common, I'd say. One way to date an older die cut that is still from like the 50s or 60s is to look at the way that they were produced. And if they are embossed, you can feel it on the die cut, but on the back you can also see it too. So pieces that were embossed and have a sort of like texture on them tend to be older. And also when they are one-sided, they tend to be a bit older from the 50s and 60s. As they got more mass produced and needed to be cheaper and more quantities made, you sort of lose the embossing.
So here's a great example of a reproduction die cut. Originally, when this was made, it probably was one-sided and had some embossing on the features of the cat's face and the moon's face. This one was a reproduction probably done in the early 2000s by the Beisel company.
Beisel is definitely one company to look out for, and they made pieces very early in the early 1900s, 1930s and 40s, all the way through. And they actually are still a company that make reproductions. These are reproductions from I think as late as 2018, and they are marked Beisel from, actually it says 2018. The original prints on these are from 1970. They're double-sided. You can see one side has a glossy finish and the other has a flat. That's sort of something you would never come across on a true like mid-century piece. But we love the reproductions just as much as the vintage stuff because a lot of times these were taped up. They have a lot of damage. They were nibbled on, like you said, Janine, from mice and other things. But we're always happy to find the reproductions. We display them just as we do our vintage ones.
Die cuts like this are so fun. You can put them in all wacky positions. And what are they called, Laura?
These are jointed die cuts because they are quite literally jointed. Really popular for skeletons, obviously. Good candidate, but we also have a big spooky tree that is jointed and you can move the arms.
Scarecrows and jack-o'-lanterns with
all
limbs
types.
that you can put in all different positions.
This is also another example of a jointed die cut, but it's a banner. And it's actually a pretty new piece that we got recently. Found this at an estate sale. So there are just so many designs out there. That's something that's so fun about die cuts, is that you can come across ones that you've seen multiple times, but we know that there are just so many different designs to look out for. One of the biggest tips I think we can give is, when you're looking at a die cut, is just to date it by how it is illustrated and the colors used. Pieces like this that are traditional black and orange, classic cats and owls, just more simplistic, usually tend to be from the 40s through to, I'd say, about the 60s.
And as you started going into the 70s, you started to get a little more color. You lost some of that embossing. And back here is a great example of some of the color and style change as we crept into the 70s and the 80s. We have this witch. You see the way she was illustrated is much different from the older pieces. And this owl as well. You see much more color being used.
And even as we get into the 80s, I'd say, in the 90s, you see more like liberties being taken with the type of illustrative design. Pieces got a little bit more cartoonish even. Like this screams 1993 to me. And so when you're looking at a die cut, just like knowing sort of the way it was illustrated, taking note of if it's more cartoonish or more like classic antique looking Halloween will definitely help you date it. One other thing that's so great about die cuts is that they're a pretty accessible piece of decor to collect. You could spend up to $300 on a piece on eBay, or you can go to a yard sale and maybe score a pile for $1.
Next up are blow molds. Now blow molds are so iconic. I remember seeing blow molds lighting the pathways of the yards as I go up to the door to go trick-or-treating,
Yes.
in the windows with that orange glow. Oh man, I love blow molds and they're so iconic.
So nostalgic. And I think they're some of the most, I mean, I feel like we're gonna say this every single time, but blow molds are so popular now.
Oh yeah.
Vintage blow molds are such a huge market. Whether you're a reseller or a collector, like everyone wants them because the value of them have just gone up so much because they are so nostalgic. They bring back some great memories, and there's just so many different varieties to collect.
And you really can't beat that orange glow.
Nothing better.
For years, I didn't know what these were called. I just called them like plastic decor pieces, but the term for them is blow mold. And they're called blow molds because of the way they are made. They are blow molded plastic. So plastic is injected into a mold and then air is pumped in there and it puffs up and creates this.
And they took off in popularity because they became really cheap and easy to make, and they're quite durable. But we are going to give you some tips when you're looking out for blow molds, you know, what to look out for and how to know you've got a good one on your hands. Blow molds have been around for quite a while. Don Featherstone is actually the creator of the flamingo lawn ornament. Really the first sort of blow mold to grace the yards of Americans, and since then they have turned into the pieces we know and love today for Halloween. They really started coming out in the 60s, the 50s sort of, when plastic became more popular, but really exploded in the 70s and late 60s when Halloween as a holiday became more and more popular.
Don Featherstone made the lawn flamingo, but he also designed Halloween blow molds, and this is a Don Featherstone designed blow mold. On the back it says Don Featherstone, and I believe this was made with, it might have been Union Products. I'll put on the screen who made it. So that's just a little piece of blow mold history. There are so many different designs of blow molds that were produced and made. They made, literally you could think of any type of Halloween motif and they made one.
Yeah.
A ghost? Made. A
haunted
pumpkin?
house?
Made. A haunted house? Made.
There are a few makers that you can look out for when you are looking at a blow mold in person. Typically we flip it onto its back or flip it over to the bottom of it.
Some makers left a stamp so you can identify them with their logo. This one is made by Empire Plastic.
So Empire is definitely a maker you can look out for. There are Union blow molds as well. We'll put in some pictures of some well-known blow mold companies that made some of the iconic Halloween blow molds that are super collectible so that you can keep an eye out for them. But not all blow molds that you'll find in the wild are necessarily stamped with a maker on it. Like this one, for example.
Yeah, this one, it has no maker on it, but some of the ways we would date this to be older are the fact that it does use a light cord rather than some have battery packs nowadays.
Yeah.
or they come with an LED light.
Yep, you just flip it onto the bottom and typically you'll see like a battery compartment. But these vintage ones, a lot of the time are hollow or they are closed on the bottom but have a small little hole. And a lot of them are really thick plastic or they have like, it's hard to explain unless you see it in person, but it has like a texture to it, almost like an orange peel sometimes, or just like a grain to the plastic, which I feel like in modern pieces you don't see. It's like super smooth. Also, you could tell with the older pieces that the faces on these are primarily airbrushed, whereas today they look a lot more machine manufactured. Also, the older pieces, especially with Halloween, were like orange and black almost exclusively. There might be a few pieces where you brought in some color, but compared to today's pieces, like all of our blow molds are mainly orange and black.
Blow molds come in a variety of sizes. We have the tabletop size, which are fantastic, and they are easier to store than the larger blow molds they made as well.
These were mainly used actually on lawns, whereas the tabletop ones were meant to be displayed inside. But size doesn't necessarily mean how valuable they are. A lot of these tabletop ones go for like hundreds of dollars. It's quite amazing. So when you're searching on eBay, you could search tabletop blow mold or large blow mold, small blow mold. As long as you've got vintage blow mold in the search terms, you're probably going to come across a few of these. Our best luck in finding them have honestly been where, Janine?
The thrift stores and garbage picking. A lot of people like to toss
Yeah.
these because they are so large, or they're, using inflatables now. So, take a loop around your neighborhood, see if someone's tossing out their plastic lawn decor, and you might be able to score one for absolutely free. Another tip would be, if you are at a yard sale or garage sale, to ask if they have any holiday. A lot of people don't put holiday out when they're doing their yard sales because they think no one wants to buy it. But if you ask if there's have any holiday that they want to get rid of, they might just say, oh yeah, we have some of that plastic stuff
In the shed, and let me pull it out. Yeah, that's a great tip, Janine. And also, one other tip before we move on to our next category of items is that when you're looking at blow molds, make sure to take a good look at them. The oranges on Halloween blow molds tend to fade quite easily. This one is actually a little faded. Originally, it was a deep orange. You could sort of see the color variation in the orange when it starts to fade. There are ways to dye them, but it's pretty like intensive, and we've tried in the past, and you could definitely do it. There are a few resources out there, but it does require some work, so you have to take that into consideration.
Because blow molds were sometimes used outside, they can be sun faded and very brittle. And so you might find one that looks fine, but if you pick it up, it might actually just crumble in your hands. So if you are going to buy a blow mold, make sure you kind of feel it, especially the bottom, and make sure it's not cracking and very brittle. If you have been to our channel before, you probably know that we absolutely love pumpkin pails. And if you're new to our channel,
We love pumpkin
pails.
Yeah, not to take you guys on a tangent, but it's something that Shiny Brite Doggo, I'm not going to say we're known for it, but I think everyone who watches knows that we love pumpkin pails. It's one of our favorite things to collect, so much so that we sort of coined a phrase here. Whenever we're out thrifting and we see a pumpkin pail, you know what we got to say, Janine?
No pumpkin left behind.
And we even created a series of t-shirts and some other fun like merch that some of you guys, thank you so much, have bought over the years. And if you are a viewer of the channel, you may be a part of the Pumpkin Patrol, which is just a little group that we've sort of coined here on our corner of the internet, a group of people who love to look out and search for vintage pumpkin pails like these.
And if you want to be part of the Pumpkin Patrol, all you gotta do is subscribe to the channel and love pumpkins. The pumpkin pail has been around for many, many years, and it actually wasn't always made of plastic, and they looked a little bit different.
That's right. The first pumpkin pails were actually made of paper, paper mache, sort of like how you would sort of make a piñata, and they were first produced in the early 1900s. They were made of paper mache. They were sort of glued and pasted all together. Yeah, exactly. And they were originally used as decoration, more so than trick-or-treat pails, and they put candles on the inside of it. And because of that, you can imagine paper, fire, maybe not the best combination, and many of them did not survive to today. So these are the most like rare, collectible, truly like almost basically antique pumpkin pails that a collector can find today.
And they weren't just pumpkins. Some of them were cats, even devils. They really were unique and honestly beautiful pieces of vintage, antique Halloween decor.
Yep, and they were all hand painted. Some of them were made in Germany. A lot of antique and really older vintage holiday pieces came from Germany, whether it's Halloween or Christmas. So they were German made, they were hand molded, or they were sometimes put into a mold. And when you look at a pail with rings on the bottom, that typically is from the mold. So they would sort of create this paste, put it in a mold, and then hand paint it. So these really unique, wonderful pieces that are so rare that we don't have one in the collection.
Yeah,
I don't think.
We don't have one of those. They are very hard to find.
They are.
And
Expensive.
they're very expensive, and we've only seen them in the wild at antique malls.
You can find them at auctions as well, maybe even a flea market, but people know the value nowadays, so you, in most cases, are going to pay up, and hopefully one day soon we'll come across one ourselves.
And thanks to the use of plastics, we now have the iconic pumpkin pail that we know of today.
And these sort of came to be in the 70s. Mostly. Maybe there are some that are from the 60s, but the pail that we know today came around in the 70s.
One of the ways we identify older, meaning pre-2000s, pumpkin pails are the quality of the plastic. A lot of pumpkin pails today are very thin and they bend. You push them in, they bend very easily.
Yeah.
But the older pumpkin pails were made of like thicker, you can hear that, thicker plastic that you really can't push in or bend too much. As well as like the way the faces are nowadays are completely different from the older faces.
The vintage faces that pails had were so unique. There was so much thought put into them. Nowadays they're almost like stickered on. Definitely have like a uniqueness to them that pails today just don't have.
Another way to identify a vintage pail is the handle. So the handle is fixed onto the pumpkin with a metal rivet. You see right there. And this band on older pumpkin pails tends to be this wide, flat, thicker band. Modern pails usually have a thin band and it's kind of like just stuck in there through like a hole in the plastic. So this metal rivet really dates it as an older pail.
So when you come across a pail that has these indicators, the thicker strap and the rivets, you can usually be pretty confident that you're looking at a pail from the 70s, I'd say, through to 1990. Anything newer is going to have a thinner band and thinner plastic, like Janine said. Some of our favorite classic pumpkin pails are these right here. These are called A.J. Renzi pails because they are actually some of the few pumpkin pails that have a maker on the bottom. You'll come across some that are Union or Carolina Enterprises, but these are marked A.J. Renzi. So on the bottom, you'll see it says A.J. Renzi, and this was just the maker of a very specific type of pumpkin pail, which are identifiable not just by the mark on the bottom, but their faces. They have a very unique, specific face that I think, personally, is so adorable, sort of has a texture in the eyes and the mouth. But what really, really identifies these pails is that when you flip them onto the back, they have a super cool embossed design on them. This is the small size, which has an embossed skull on the back. There's a medium version, which has a witch embossed on the back. And the most common is this big guy. Look at that, back in the day, we only paid 69 cents for him. He's the most common and has this really cool scaredy cat embossed image on the back. And I actually misspoke. There are more than 3 designs. There's actually 4. There is even this tiny little A.J. Renzi, which is more of a candy container than a true pail as far as its function. And on the back of this one is a little embossed ghost. But in the 80s and 90s, pails became even more creative beyond just being a traditional pumpkin.
These skulls were made by A.J. Renzi and they come in a variety of colors. And they are so amazing and they're highly collectible. Sometimes you can luck out and get some on eBay for $40, but sometimes the really rare colors can go for over $100, even $200.
And there are, just like this pail, like other pail varieties like cat heads and cauldrons. There are just so many out there. And what I really like about pails is that you could still snag them for a pretty affordable price, whether it's at the thrift store or at a yard sale. But they also can be very collectible, like Janine said. So that's just a quick overview of one of our favorite pieces of vintage Halloween decor, the classic pumpkin pail.
Oh, this isn't a pumpkin.
When plastics became really popular in all sorts of home decor and even home products in the 1960s and 1950s, actually, right in the mid-century, one thing to come out for Halloween decor were candy containers. And candy containers were popular for Christmas, Easter, lots of holidays. For Halloween, they came out with some really cool pieces. And these are really collectible too. They came in tons of different varieties. There were witches, there were cats and pumpkins. They were made by a few makers, most notably Rosbro. And one way to identify them is just by the fact that they're very simple. They're orange and mainly airbrushed with black paint over them. These are just some examples that we've seen on the internet. They're quite hard to find. I'd say mainly we find these at estate sales, Janine, when we're lucky enough.
Yeah, if we're lucky, we'll find them at estate sales, but usually we have only seen them at antique malls. So if you're looking to find any candy container or plastic toy that was made by some of the iconic companies like Rosbro, you're most likely will find them on eBay.
Yep, that's usually your best bet. Expect to spend anywhere from $30 to $70+ depending on what you're looking at. The ones that we have are more common. Sometimes we're lucky to find them at an estate sale, but they are quite collectible. But they're really cool and quite a piece of Halloween history. We even have some here that are still filled with the original candy.
You might think of noisemakers and think like the only holiday that you would use them for would be New Year's, but back in the day, they were used a lot for Halloween, and there are many different pieces of noisemakers that were made for Halloween with amazing graphics.
Yeah, and that's mainly the reason people collect the noisemakers, I feel like, is that they have some of the most amazing graphics on them. They were used mainly for Halloween parties, and Halloween parties were huge. They contribute to a lot of Halloween's history because unlike Christmas, where people truly decorated for, hundreds of years, Halloween was more of just like a celebration. And so a lot of the pieces for vintage, like older Halloween, come from party supplies, noisemakers being one of them. They were first produced just like the die cuts, just like the pumpkin pails in Germany in the early 20th century. They were made of paper and wood. They're really hard to come by. We're lucky enough to have two in our collection. We have this little pipe, which has the most incredible illustration graphics on them. This was all paper, a wood top. I don't know how it made noise, but it's a really cool piece. It's probably our oldest noisemaker in our collection. And we also have a little party blower.
It's amazing that something like this has lasted as long as it has. It has amazing artwork on it. It's made entirely of paper, and this little mouthpiece is still on it as well. Truly a piece of Halloween history.
After the German-made noisemakers, manufacturing moved over to the US, and they came out with a lot of tin lithograph designs. So we have quite a collection. We've gotten these over the years from, oh my gosh, we've been so lucky to find these. Estate sales, the thrift store, maybe flea markets as well. We haven't paid too much for them, a few off of eBay.
Some tin noisemakers are older than others. You can tell that by the handles and some of the materials that were used. On the noisemakers from the 40s and 50s, the handles were made of wood, so that's a way you can identify those pieces. As you move into the 60s and 70s, you see a lot of those mouthpieces and handles change into plastic.
You can have two noisemakers that have the exact same graphics, the exact same colors, but they have two different materials for the handles. So like Janine said, that's definitely a sure way to date them. You can also look at the patina and just like the wear, because they're made of tin, depending on how they were stored, a lot of them have rust on them. So that's one way you can look as well. And actually quite a few of them do have manufacturer marks. The main manufacturer that we come across is the US Metal Toy Manufacturing Company out of the United States. They manufactured here in the US. One thing we love about noisemakers as collectors is that a lot of these graphics encapsulated so much of vintage Halloween. Like you can have one noisemaker that has pumpkins and haunted houses, ghosts, skeletons, all on one piece. The colors in most cases are really bright and amazing. So I'd say if you're looking for a piece that really feels like vintage Halloween and you want to sort of start collecting, I think noisemakers are a great item because they are so unique. There's something that they don't make anymore. Like you can get new die cuts today, you can get a new blow mold, but they don't make noisemakers anymore for Halloween. They're just truly a unique piece of Halloween that we absolutely adore.
Noisemakers come in a variety of sizes and styles, and there's definitely something out there for everyone. You can find a noisemaker for as low as like $15, or you can go up to over $100 for a noisemaker.
All right, guys, that is a comprehensive guide. Maybe not everything, but of a lot of things when it comes to vintage Halloween collecting. We hope you learned a thing or two and maybe even found a new category of items to search for out in the wild.
And if you love Halloween as much as we do, you're going to want to stick around because we're going to be releasing a video that is just on 80s and 90s Halloween decor, and man, that's going to be exciting to talk about.
We're super excited for that, so make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that. And if you're new to this video and us as a channel, make sure to check out our other videos. you can see just how we've collected all these pieces using the tips that we just told you in this video. Let us know in the comments of this video what your favorite thing is that you saw, what's something new that you learned, or leave a tip for us if we missed anything that you know about that we didn't mention.
And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any vintage holiday fun that we are going to have.
All right, guys, until next time, thank you so much for joining us. See you next time, and
no pumpkin left behind.
Bye.